And we are starting the webinar.
Alrighty. Well, hello and welcome to the February 23rd, 2022 meeting of the Regional Housing Council. I'm Carolyn Cox from Lacey City Council and I'm your new chair. So be kind, please. This is my first meeting. We have a tradition of starting our meetings with welcome and check-ins. So why don't we begin with, what do we do with Tumwater? Seems like we almost never start with Tumwater.
Thanks, Councilmember Cox. I'm Michael Althauser, council member from Tumwater, representing the city on the call. I'm joined with Councilmember Joan Cathy, as well as our city administrator, John Doan, and Brad Medrud from our planning department. Happy to be here.
Nice. Okay. Well, Thurston County.
Carolina Mejia, Thurston County Commissioner. I am joined today by our County Manager, Ramiro Chavez, Tom Webster, Keeley Marino, Jacinda Nostalgis, and that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Carolina. And Olympia.
Hi there, I'm Jim Cooper from the City Council. I'm joined by Councilmember Danny Madrone, our Home Fund Manager, Darian Lightfoot. And Darian, is Keith joining today or not? Do you know?
Sure, I thought he was, but haven't seen him.
Okay, we probably expect Keith Staley, Assistant City Manager. So good to see you, everyone.
All righty. Yelm.
Good evening, Brian Hess, Yelm City Council member.
Great. Well, welcome, Brian. Glad you could be with us today. And for City of Lacey, we have our mayor who serves as alternate on this council now, Andy Ryder. We have Rick Walk, who is our community and economic development director on the call. We have Kelly Adams, and we're expecting City Manager Scott Spence. Did I miss anybody from Lacey? Hope not. Okay. So has everybody had a chance to take a look at the agenda? And okay, any comments on it? How about I'd be happy to entertain a motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you, Jim.
I'll second, I guess.
All right. Been moved by Jim and seconded by Michael. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, we have an agenda. Yay. Now for the public comment section of our meeting, I'm told we have 3 people lined up for comment. Kelly, would you do the honors of welcoming them in one by one?
Yes, we'll start with Doug DeForest.
Okay. Doug, are you with us? Is he here, Kelly?
So sometimes he's coming over. Sometimes they'll ask them if they are for consent. So there is Doug right there.
Looks like he's muted. You're muted, Doug. There you go. Oh.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, I don't know why my picture isn't showing, but you all know my face anyway. Anyway, do you want my remarks now or you want to introduce the other people?
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay, so I appreciate the opportunity to present my thoughts on this subject to you. I think you all know that I've been involved approximately for the past 25 years in housing issues originating in the private sector. And for the past 8 years or so, I have been active and still am active in the public arena, including being a member of the Thurston Thrives Coordinating Council, the Housing Action Team, and the Affordable Housing Team. I might add as a personal note that I'm sympathetic to people with drug, alcohol, and mental problems. I won't go into the issue, but there is a reason why I've not had symptoms of alcohol in the last 35 years. But over the past few years, I've been discouraged by the lack of results that the current approach to solving the homeless issue has produced. There are good people involved with good intentions, but the past 12 years have been all talk and all too much little action. Therefore, the article in the Sunday Olympian wasn't a total surprise. Even as it's only 50% accurate, the blunt fact is that the situation is a mess, and the current efforts to solve the homeless problem with planning and coordination simply has not worked. In my opinion, if you want better results, I strongly recommend that you look at the solutions to homelessness used in San Diego County and in San Bernardino, where they have had significant improvement in the homeless situation. The key is the formation of a regional housing authority. An organization has the legal authority, the funding, and the people to address the homeless issues from beginning to end. They have the funding to hire construction of temporary and/or permanent housing. They move the homeless individual by individual into this housing. They have the staff to provide mental, alcohol, and drug counseling as necessary, and they assist them in getting into jobs and thus becoming contributing members of the community. And I would like to recommend one more thing. There needs to be an individual or small group of elected officials that provide active leadership to get the job done. No such person or group exists at present. I recognize this is a big step for this region, but this is an unusual situation that is in danger of getting worse. It certainly calls for doing things differently than we're doing them now. And I might close by noting that years ago, a group of leaders from this county formed LOT, which in reality is a regional sewer authority. And LOT, as we all know, has been eminently successful. The question I close with for you now is this: how could we adopt the LOT model to solve the homeless problems in this community? Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Doug.
Next, we will bring over Lisa.
Lisa, when you're ready.
Hello.
Your audio is reverberating.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes, that's better.
My name is Lisa Stridinger. I am a case manager at the mitigation site. I did not mean to sign in for comment. I apologize. I'm just here to learn and to try to help your community make it the best they can. I agree with the gentleman that spoke just a moment ago. There are wonderful practices out there. I think you guys are doing a great job as a community, and I'm here to support you, and I just wanted to listen and thank you for everything you're doing.
Well, thank you. We're glad you're here.
Our next registered speaker is Jimmy.
Okay. Jimmy, when you're ready.
Several steps. There we go. Start video, unmute. Can you hear me now? Thanks. Hi.
Yes.
Hey, everybody. I appreciate, I also want to echo what Lisa just said and also what Doug said about a couple things. I know there's a lot of people working really, really hard trying to make this work. And I know there's a recurring theme of how do we coordinate better, et cetera. And I know that so many of you are just working your tails off, and it's very frustrating that we're only getting just so much done and only getting just so far. So I just wanted to comment today and bring you a little bit from let's get 2022 going better. I think we all here want to do it. And I'm just want to propose that we try to do 100% of the job instead of 50%. And one of the suggestions I'd make is that we ask all the agencies involved, especially on the service providing side of things, to come up with and be supported to come up with a budget that actually does 100% of the job. And working with the other organizations in their field, be it behavioral health, to come up with what does that actually look like? How many people do we need to hire to really get in everyone's face and carry them along to the next steps? And that's something we're simply not doing. This latest move with Olympia sweeping Deschutes and moving people into hotels and the reverberation that came from that, because it was just this unplanned, could have been more planned, let's put it that way, where all of a sudden all these agencies are strapped and they're staffing and the volunteers and everyone's putting out all this extra. It was heartbreaking to listen to you guys talk about that a couple of months ago. And those are the people working really hard in this and all the fallout that came from that. And you could see that coming a mile away. Why can't we plan for that? Well, we can, we just didn't. Let's do that. And how do we do that? Yes, we need to coordinate better. Yes, we need more, maybe a different kind of authority. I'd like to suggest things to the retreat. I'm going to offer you a few things. I'm speaking today on behalf of myself as a volunteer, not as someone who's the policy liaison for Earth Homes, which helped build a mitigation site, micro shelters. And I was really also blown away by the article because I knew about a lot of those things and I didn't try to go public with them because I was trying to work internally with all y'all and different people in the city staff to try to move things forward and get better results, because it was just over and over. You had the site council meeting every week for months and they weren't getting their needs met. These are the people that live at the site that actually started meeting once a week with the folks of CCS at the site. The city's overseeing that contract. I don't want to pick on the city of Olympia, but I wanted to point out how important the mitigation site is as a model for the area. Olympia being in the center of Thurston County and right next to Tumwater and Lacey and Yelm right here, that mitigation site is one of your key jewels in the crown. And it's so important for it to work well, and it's not, and it's terrible. And CCS didn't get the support they needed to do it right. Olympia didn't oversight and give them support enough and follow that. The city of Olympia put out like half the money they needed to do this job properly. And this is what I'm seeing is this, it's not, I don't want to say half-assed, but it's like, yes, there's not a lot of budget out there for these things, but this is what we need to go get. So I'm going to suggest doing that super budget, each agency coming up with what does it take to do 100%, give them the money it takes to do the staff to come up with that budget. So you can look at the picture of what it actually takes to do this 100%. And I'm also going to suggest that we take a delegation from this group, which I think has the best chance at getting something done because it is the most powerful group. You've got the HHH, the HAT, the Affordable Housing Work Group, but the RHC has the most juice. Put together a delegation and go to the state, go to the governor's office and say, okay, who's dealing with homelessness policy? Let's put that together with the legislative leaders. Go to the federal representatives that we have from Washington, go to Congress, get the rest of the money to do this job, and get with the people from Oregon. They're looking at the same question. California, same question. Go get the money. They just put $10 million into Seattle. 10 million, that's nothing. They, the Starbucks and the other corporations put that together for recently up there. So I don't want to keep rambling, but I would like to talk to you more, but not right now. Just the last thing I'll say is, and I was really surprised and shocked to find this, frankly. I helped raise money for the beds for the mitigation site. They didn't deploy them. They ordered them and got them. They're not there. That was in November. I'm just like, excuse me? I totally thought they were installed by now. I'm blown away. These people are living without that. When the original budget for the mitigation site, which is everyone's mitigation site, didn't even have beds or little chairs or anything. They didn't have totes. I tried to get totes. I'm like, the city approved $3,500 for the totes in November. They said, oh, we'll do it in the spring when we move. Excuse me? And I didn't go to all the city council members and say, what the hell? But I should have, because it's still not happening. So I'm talking to you, Jim and Keith, and the rest of Olympia. And again, not picking on Olympia. This is everyone's issue. And I want to support helping it. I'm here to work. Other people are too. But we need a little more action. And I'm calling in this council to really look at the retreat question of like, how do we coordinate it better? How do we get more authority to really do this work even better and get 100% done instead of half of it? So thanks for hearing me out. And I appreciate your time very much. And I know that all of you are very dedicated. I'm not picking on anyone. I'm just saying we need to do this better and we can. I look forward to working with you to make it happen. Thank you so much for today.
Thank you, Jimmy. Is there anybody else on the call wishing to address the Housing Council?
Chair, I see none.
Okay, thank you, Kelly. Moving on, I would like to hear a motion to approve the January minutes.
So moved.
Second.
This is Michael.
All right, moved by Michael, seconded by Jim. Any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Right. The 2022 request for proposals update, that would be Tom. You ready?
I am ready. Good evening, everyone. So just a brief update on our request for proposals. We talked about this last month, but just a refresher for everyone and for the public who are listening. So we are ready to go with our request for proposals, which will be issued this Friday, February 25th. As a reminder, we are requesting proposals for, it's a smaller request this year, as most of our awards from last year were 2-year awards. We will be coming to you in another couple months to ask for renewal of those awards. But we have a couple of funds that we are issuing this year for request for proposals. The first is capital dollars for capital projects. So we have our Home Investment Partnership Act funding. These are federal dollars. We do not have a budget yet. There's not a federal budget yet. So as soon as we have that, we'll know what that dollar amount is. But historically, we've received in the neighborhood of around $700,000, $750,000 of home funds to award, and those are for capital projects. We will pair that with our local 2060 document recording fee. We have a $550,000 of our document recording fee to combine with our home funds. So total, we expect to have around $1.1, $1.2 million in capital dollars to allocate to projects. We also have our local document recording fee 2163. As you approved last month, we will be issuing $400,000 of 2163 funds to support cold and hazardous weather shelter. So that is an increase over previous years. This year we funded cold and hazardous weather shelters at $250,000. For next year, we'll be funding it at $400,000. So we'll be soliciting applications for that purpose. The last one I wanted to mention is relatively new. We found out just a couple of weeks ago, after our meeting last month, that the state allocated some additional consolidated homeless grant funding to the county. So we have approximately $308,000 that we'll be issuing in an RFP as part of this RFP for activities that are eligible under the consolidated homeless grant. So that is, traditionally we receive around $700,000 in CHG each year. And so this will add to that total. Those funds need to be spent by the end of June 30th, 2023. So that is in addition to the RFP. I will also note, although it's not under the purview of the Regional Housing Council, we'll be issuing an RFP for community development block grant programs for the South County. Again, we don't have the final federal budget for that. We expect to issue an RFP for approximately $1 million. The South County mayors identified their priorities as public infrastructure, public facilities, public services, and economic development were their activities that they identified for priority funding. That will be on the same timeline. As I said, applications will open up on the 25th. Applications will be due on April 1st. With during the month of April, there'll be a review process, and we'll be coming to you in May with recommendations for activities to fund. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions about the RFP process this year. Oh, sorry, one last thing is there will be a bidders conference on March 3rd next week to provide additional information to applicants regarding the RFP and answer any questions they have.
Okay. Anybody have a question for Tom? Michael?
Yeah, so Tom, just to be clear, for the CDBG for the South County, housing is not one of the priorities that they listed for that funding. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Even tacitly, it's just not included in that list of things?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Tom?
I have a question to ask.
Sure.
Tom, I'm just out of curiosity, and I paid attention to all the numbers you were giving. And then I kind of went and looked at the website. If groups or organizations want to apply for these, and I apologize for not really fully understanding it, but these are grants that you're looking at or something. Is this for organizations to apply for, or is this money that we're going to be looking at on how we're going to spend?
Yes, so thanks for that question. These are funds for nonprofit agencies to apply for. Once the RFP goes live, we will send out, we have an email list that we send out to a wide range of organizations. It also posted on the county website. So this is for nonprofit organizations. For the CDBG funds, jurisdictions can also apply directly for those funds if they have a project. Those applications will come back for the non-CDBG, for the funds under the control of this group. They will come back and be reviewed by a technical panel of staff, with recommendations coming to this body to make final recommendations, and ultimately going to the Board of County Commissioners for approval on awards. But those awards, they are grants that are made to local nonprofit organizations to carry out activities.
Okay, and so when you were talking about when it goes live, it's going to show up on the website. Is it going to show up on the website for the Regional Housing Council? Because I just looked, I'm like learning to navigate through that website, and as you were talking, I was looking to see how one can apply for this or something that was indicating what was going on, and I didn't see anything on the website. And for me to be, and I just want to know so that if there's other organizations out there that may not get that email, they at least know where to go look.
Yeah, so historically we've put it on the Office of Housing and Homeless Prevention with the county, and Public Health and Social Services has a procurement RFP website where we've posted it to, but I will make sure and talk to it that we also post it to our Regional Housing Council website. That's an excellent suggestion, and we'll make sure that happens.
I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Carolyn?
Yeah, Jim?
Just to point out, we will also get that announcement via email, so then we can forward it out as well.
Right. Good point. Thank you. Back to Brian. Brian, did you get your question answered to that?
Yes, I did.
Okay.
And I appreciate Tom's being open to my questioning and all. As I said, I apologize, new to this whole thing, trying to follow everything, and knowing that there's another website to go look at, I will try to find that website as well. Thank you.
Okay. And just with you, Brian, just a little housekeeping note here, because I can't see you, and you may have a question. Do you know how to use the raise hand function?
Yes, I did. I had my raise hand. I had it up,
okay.
And you were about to close out, and that's why I spoke up.
Okay, sorry, I didn't see it, but good. All righty. Thank you very much. All righty. Any other questions or comments on the RFPs? Okay. Let's move on to technical team work group updates. We've got Keeley and Tom up on this, and we'll start with Home Fund.
Yeah, so I will start with an update on the Home Fund. So currently just a quick status update on where we are. So after the county commissioners passed the countywide Home Fund, as everyone is aware, next steps is staff from the county and City of Olympia have been working on an outline of an interlocal agreement between the county and City of Olympia around how to merge the Olympia Home Fund with the countywide Home Fund. So staff have a preliminary draft outline, and next steps are, I believe, Jay Burney is working to arrange a meeting with elected officials and staff between the city and county to further discuss that outline. Once that interlocal agreement is farther along, there are requirements. There's kind of within the ordinance that was passed at the county, actions that need to be taken with the Regional Housing Council ILA to include amendments to that. So that will follow the Olympia County ILA in terms of how the funds are merged. So we're looking at preliminarily, looking at a process where Olympia would provide some of their capital funds and merge with the countywide home funds initially, and retain some portion of their home fund initially while they're still funding some ongoing activities. Then eventually those would transition over, but those details, lots of details still need to be worked out on that process. So further conversations to be had between the county and the city around that process and what that ILA looks like. With that, I'd open it up to other members of the county, whether Ramiro has anything he would like to add or anyone from Olympia who has comments on that process. Keith and I have been working on that high level outline of that ILA, but I know more discussion is needed.
Ramiro?
Good afternoon, thank you. As Tom stated, the Board of County Commissioners passed this home fund on January 18th. We are here February 23rd, and I'm glad they're moving steadfast, working with the City of Olympia and determining what the outline of this in local agreement will be. I think we have a pretty good baseline to work off of. And I'm confident that we can get a expedited process to get this ILA in place. And I believe that is going to be the premise in which the interlocal agreement at the Regional Housing Council needs to be revisited, open it, and have an additional conversation. Hopefully, we can get to that point. I don't think we're going to be able to have this ILA in place before the retreat, but certainly, hopefully after that will be in place. That is my hope and expectations, at least from the county. I appreciate the collaborative conversation with the City of Olympia. Sometimes the ILAs become a little more complicated, but I think we're in a good path. Until the attorneys get a hold of those documents, and that is a different story.
Good point there. All right. Anybody have any questions about where we are with Home Fund and our ILAs? Okay.
Oh, maybe if I may, sorry, I meant to. So also on the back end, we need to submit all the necessary paperwork to the Department of Revenue, just to make sure that they're working on that. That has been submitted. We're in the working with them. Hopefully we can expect to have this new taxation be in place by July 1st.
Okay, thank you. All right, moving on to scattered site.
Do you want to take this one, Keeley?
Sure. Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. So we had Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, as you recall, come and give a presentation last time we met as the Regional Housing Council, and they also presented the same information to the Board of County Commissioners about 2 weeks following that. They have been very much wrapped up in handling folks in hotels up until today, in terms of the original folks that were moved from Deschutes encampment on December 8th. They have now instigated their hotel program, Olympia Mutual Aid Partners, and so that's separate from scattered site, but it is, that group is moving folks from the Super 8 Motel in Lacey today, Monday, yesterday, and today, and I think today was the final day, over to the Olympia Inn to start that specific and separate project. But as far as scattered site continues, they are still engaging with folks at least 2 of the 3 original encampments. We've got, though, each of them kind of dealing with the repercussions of sweeps. So Ensign Road, of course, which has been well discussed, and they're prepping residents along the DOT property on Wheeler Street for their eventual move or sweep as well. So they are moving along and still doing pretty interesting work in terms of data and data reporting. I don't have any updated numbers because they've been 100% immersed in supporting folks in the hotels and moving them out of the hotels into their new program. So Tom, I'm looking to you to remind me if there was anything else we wanted to talk about specifically.
I don't know if kind of folks have questions about kind of the status, especially the hotels, that folks have been moving out of the Super 8 and will be kind of, some will be under the Olympia Inn under the Holy Maps program, as Keeley said. We were able to successfully get some folks into housing. Some folks have entered the LEAD program. Unfortunately, not as many as ideal, not as many as we hoped. So many folks are entering back into unsheltered homelessness after the hotel stay. But we were able to successfully house some folks or find alternative solutions.
Well, and also Olympia Mutual Aid Partners did prioritize those into their specific hotel program who were actively working on a pathway to some form of housing. So whether that be LEAD through treatment or Unity Commons or maybe Lehigh Plum Street Village or what have you, the folks that they prioritized into their program over at the Olympia Inn had something online for moving forward towards some kind of stability. I know tomorrow, I think someone moves into Unity Commons and there's someone who's waiting for a bed by Friday. So that's really how it goes. There's no floodgate. We thought we had an opportunity where there would be a little tiny bit of a floodgate with Unity Commons leasing up, but the timing didn't sync up, unfortunately.
Do you know if any of the people who are being moved, I understand some of them may be back on the street, are we making any hazardous weather provisions for at least this week for them?
Yes, so we have declared a hazardous weather event. Yesterday, interim public health director Kurt Hardin and Dr. Abdumalik, public health officer, approved the declaration that was recommended from the hazardous weather task force. So we do have beds tonight. There are a number of individuals that were not ready to go. So there were 15 rooms at the Super 8 last night that ended up staying just because they didn't get their stuff out on time. So that was an accidental bonus with regards to one of the coldest nights. And then we'll have shelter available tonight, Thursday and Friday night at First Christian Church in downtown Olympia. And I know that we have been providing survival gear, we being the collective, we predominantly City of Olympia, and Gabby from Olympic Cards and Comics has donated a sizable number of tents. So shout out to Olympic Cards and Comics to get them survival gear. And then Pipe is doing their shelter in place support through the encampments. So yes.
Great, thank you. Michael, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, Gabby is a saint. I guess that, so part of the promise, or a lot, some of the value that I saw in the scattered site program is that, you know, when we took it on, it's kind of in this pilot phase to gather data to measure effectiveness, and there hadn't been a program exactly of its kind serving an area of our size population wise. So it was novel to a certain extent. So I guess I'm sort of curious. I guess we're probably about halfway into the timeline. If I recall, didn't we say go like about 6 months ago? So I guess I'm sort of curious how everyone is feeling so far about the data gathering efforts, and whether you sort of think that at the end of this we'll have like, what is the product going to look like in terms of being able to analyze what we did and being able to articulate the successes of that, and also being able to articulate points for growth and for improvement in the future as we look down the road for potentially expanding scattered site.
I'm wondering if I could just refer back to the report that they provided. It was pretty thorough. Last Regional Housing Council, it went into pretty great detail. So I'm wondering if there's
is like at the end of this, do you think that's basically like what the vehicle will look like, but it'll be updated to reflect things that happened between now and then? Or
absolutely. And they're actually taking some interesting, they're taking surveys, or they did take surveys of those who were at the hotels. I haven't seen the questions that they were asking them, but they're also trying to take advantage of that situation too, to see like how that plays out with the scattered site, and are collecting data specifically to that. So yes, okay. I anticipate there being a lot of recommendations, a lot of promising data and interesting data to highlight the successes and the stresses of this project.
Yeah, that's great. My follow-up question was going to be if there will be recommendations in it. So that's really good to hear.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay. Anything else on scattered site? Okay. Our next item is hotel acquisition, and I'm wondering if I might call on Rick Walk to update us a little bit on that.
Yes, as the Regional Housing Council is aware, the city of Lacey and Thurston County is working together to try to identify potential hotel for acquisition for repurposing for some type of program related to either from overnight shelter to permanent supportive housing. We are working towards that effort. We have basically a hotel in mind, and we're in the formal property acquisition phase, so we can't really disclose too much at this point in time. But we are making progress towards that with our respective partnerships with the county and taking next steps. We have the appraisal in place, and now it's a matter of, do we move forward with a formal interlocal agreement with Thurston County. And I'll invite Tom if he wants to add any from the county's perspective on this.
No, and I guess I might pass the buck to Ramiro. We had hoped to have a briefing with the county commissioners earlier this week. That was unable to happen, so I think that will be rescheduled at some point. So I don't know if Ramiro, at this point, I don't have anything else for the county to add.
Yeah, unfortunately, I had to cancel the executive session that I had scheduled with the board this past Tuesday. So I have that already lined up for Tuesday morning, and we'll be providing the details of this particular potential partnership with the city of Lacey. So yeah, that executive session is scheduled for Tuesday morning.
So as you can see, we're very early in the stages, but we'll keep the Regional Housing Council apprised as this effort moves forward.
Thank you, Rick. Any questions for Rick, Ramiro, or Tom? Okay. Moving on to property acquisition.
Oh, Carolyn, is there an update on the Port Hotel?
On the what?
On the hotel in Tumwater on Port property?
Oh, I don't know. Tom, do you know?
I do not have an update. Brad, did you have an update, or someone on the tech team? We talked about this. Was it Darian? Maybe Darian had the update.
The only information that I had was that it wasn't clear if it was going to be able to move forward or not, pending some other actions that were occurring. So it was sounding less and less likely that it would actually occur.
Is that as a result of interaction with the FAA, or?
No, there are other factors, but again, I don't think they've developed far enough for us to go beyond just commenting on that.
Okay. I see Derek being very animated here. Do you have something you want to add?
Oh, I just had a lot of hope in it. And so I was just sad to hear that wasn't the tone. But yeah, last I heard from Craig was that the port was looking to connect with, the staff is looking to connect with the FAA. And that's all I had. But.
Okay. I hope we don't totally give up on that. I mean, it'd be nice to be able to get to a point where there's something that's preventing us from going forward. But, you know, the thing what really interests me about the hotel acquisition is, yeah, there's somewhat of an upfront cost, but the fact that it's already built is saving us so many dollars, and they're immediately, in a relatively immediately time frame, could be accessible. And there's no other way this community can put those many units online in such a short period of time, unless we go down an acquisition like this with the hotels. And so I'm just hoping we're not just, you know, sometimes we run into, you know, an issue and we're like, oh, that's it. It's too hard. We can't go forward. We see that all the time. Well, I don't want to give up so easy, especially when it comes to the port properties or the other acquisition that we're looking at. I mean, I'm have to be convinced overwhelmingly that it just can't happen before I'm willing to give up on it. And I hope the whole Regional Housing Council agrees with me on this.
Before you joined the council, Andy, with this group did draft a very strong letter that went to port commissioners advocating the project. And I think there's great interest in keeping the pressure on and making that happen. Anybody want to add anything to that in terms of our history on it and our position? Okay.
Councilmember Cox?
Yes. Scott, thank you.
That's right. So real quickly, my understanding is that the port received correspondence back from the FAA with a list of criteria if they were going to make that move. So they're in the process of working with a consultant to see what the cost would be to respond to that criteria, to see if they can actually achieve that goal of actually using the hotel for that specific purpose. So I believe that's the stage they're in currently right now.
Any idea what that looks like?
I don't know, but I think it's the dilemma about having permanent residents within a FAA basically flight zone. And so my understanding is that they have to respond to their criteria if they're going to transition away from a limited, stay, if you will. And so that's what they're trying to work through, if that makes sense. And so they're working with a consultant to respond to the Federal Aviation Administration, which I think we all know when we work with the federal government, it does take some expertise and some time.
All righty. Thank you, Scott. And Jim, looks like you had your hand up.
Yeah, I think yes, and Andy, I think it's really important. We have to get these two hotels, and frankly, these might be our only two options in the whole county for that many units that are already existing and built, with the exception of maybe empty shells of state office buildings in the future. And so I've been telling the legislators when they talk about Inslee's, the Challenge Seattle Inslee package, no matter how much money comes, if we can't get a hotel in 2 years, we need the National Guard, right? So something else is going to have to happen other than just money, including us going into executive session and talking about our powers when it comes to public infrastructure. And I'll stop at that.
I hear you, Jim, and I have your back on that for sure.
Thank you. Anything on property acquisition? Tom?
For the other one, sorry. If Keith, I'll turn this was the Franz Anderson property, so I kind of had turned it to Keith for an update on that.
Yes, sir. Thanks, Tom. The county and the city now have an interlocal agreement between the two of them for cost sharing for the acquisition and development of the Franz Anderson Road property into an emergency housing facility. That could be a safe parking facility or a tiny house village or a mitigation site or some other type of emergency housing that we all know and recognize the need for. We will be coming back to the Regional Housing Council, as Tom said, to amend the interlocal agreement to address home fund, but also to talk to you about how we move forward with funding the operations of this facility. Both the city and the county are committed to its construction, purchase, and development, but operations becomes obviously a critical element of this. And at this point, funds have not been identified for operations. So more conversation to come on that.
Alrighty. Anybody have a question for Keith? Anybody have anything else they want to talk about on property acquisition? Okay. Moving on to the DEI contractor update. Would it be Keeley? Okay.
Yes, just bringing to you that we had a review panel of folks who are on the front lines or who have lived experience in our homeless crisis response system of either experiencing homelessness or who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, to review, come up with scoring criteria, and then review the 2 applications that we received to be awarded the contract to provide DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion consultation services for specifically the homeless crisis response system. As you recall, Regional Housing Council around this time last year, or in the spring of last year, approved $150,000 set aside specifically for this. And so a consultant group was chosen, and that group is Confluence Consulting Northwest. We are awaiting the contract approval from the Board of County Commissioners, which we anticipate to happen barring any unforeseen disruptions next Tuesday, where we have a full Board of County Commissioners, and they're eager to get to work. So one of the members of the consultant group has facilitated the point in time count for 2 years in the past 5. And so she's very familiar with our system, and she's working with a great team that are very eager to begin. So we've sent them initial lists of meetings and resources for them to read and kind of do some background work on our system. And we're really looking forward to working with them. They're going to start developing a recruitment strategy for a steering committee, which is the majority of the work they'll be doing, is recruiting, and then developing a process for a steering committee specifically for Black, Indigenous, people of color, community members, and members of our homeless crisis response system. So very hopeful that this will have meaningful impact on our homeless crisis response system plan strategies, specifically those around addressing racial disparities. But overall, we hope this is a lasting part of our homeless crisis response system that continues to vet and to create strategies that will actually address racial disparities in our system, and address disparities that exist in the delivery of our system, and in the policies we create, and in the ways that we recruit for RFPs, whatever. We hope that the impact is felt exponentially as this process moves forward. So very excited to bring that to our system.
Yeah, yay. Thank you for moving that along so well, Keeley. Nice job. Okay, this brings us to the HAT and RHC retreat update. And I think we've got several people who want to engage on this. Jim, you've been leading this effort, and Darian has an update as well on the scope of work for the consultants. So why don't we start with Jim and kind of see where we are with that and go from there.
So I'll just say I've been leading by not doing anything and having excellent staff keeping the ball rolling in the last month. So Darian and Keeley can talk a little bit about that contract negotiation and scope of work. I will add, I had a great meeting today at lunchtime with Lisa Vatsky, who works with the Housing Finance Commission and is on the Olympia Home Fund Advisory Committee. And I just want to park, in case I forget later, that she's offered to do some sort of baseline 101 for us around both how it's working on that advisory committee, but also how the bigger picture of housing finance is working right now and changing rapidly, and really connected to all of the DEI conversation that Keeley was just talking about. So that's what I have to say, and then I'll turn it over to Keeley and Darian to talk about the actual upcoming event.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilmember. I have the scope. Should I share my screen so we can review it together, or does everyone have it in their agenda? I can look at it separately. I'm impartial.
I believe it's.
I think screen share is helpful.
You got it.
Yeah, I think so too.
Okay.
All right.
No one look at my desktop.
While we're waiting, Keeley, is there anything you want to do to cue that up, or?
Sure. We met with Megan Picard to discuss, just kind of talk about what do we want? What are we talking about? What are we looking for? She asked some really great questions for us to ponder. and was really responsive to our ideas and our questions, and also is familiar with our system. So it was an excellent conversation. She was really quick to return a scope, which was emailed out, I believe, to everyone, and I hope so. And I'll let you talk us through it, Darian.
Great. Okay. So some suggestions we've received as I walk us through. We have a narrative section up here of what her intent is with her team, understanding that it's not just going to be the RHC, but also HAT members and staff from every jurisdiction will be participating in the retreat. And it seems like her and her team have a really great grasp of what we're trying to do and how it's multifaceted, and bringing in the ILA with the home fund and with the updating the ILA with the RHC. So it seems like they have a really good grasp of our goals. And so I think just for deliverables, it helps to come down here to talk about the plan. So some feedback I received from elected officials and staff is that they'd like to see an increase in interviews. Right now they have 12 interviews and the suggestion was maybe around 14. I told that to Megan and she said that would be an increased cost. So I'm curious on feedback on if folks feel that 12 is appropriate, if we'd like to see more than 12 interviews, and that is up to you all. The retreat would happen over 2 days. We're aiming for the first part of May. We have a doodle poll that should be out soon. The whole doodle website was in disarray today. So we tried to send it out, but the time zone is just wrong every time we do it. So a doodle poll will be going out very soon for folks to pick 2 days. Again, with the 2 days, the suggestion that I received was not 2 back-to-back days, seeing that could just be a lot of content. So 2 days, the first part of May, if they're in the same week, if it was the first week, one the second week, also open to discussion. And another suggestion was having a clear product at the end of the retreat, whether that be an organizational structure of what the new body would look like, whether that be some sort of org chart that incorporated all jurisdictions, but having a more concrete product at the end of the retreat was also a suggestion that we can talk about here today. So I'll pause, see if anyone has any thoughts or questions.
Hey, if you have a question, sing out because I can't see you on the screen here.
This is Michael. I don't have a lot of questions about this component, but I was wondering if we're going to discuss the cost breakdown for this $25,000 for shares per jurisdiction. Would it be appropriate to ask that later?
Sure.
It's on the agenda to discuss today and finalize. So hopefully we leave the meeting with clear instructions on cost. I'm routing it through our legal team and we'll have the end product, but I think that we discussed that we would pay and then it would like a reimbursement of the city, but the specific breakdown of who would pay for how much, I don't think that we don't have that determined.
Right.
Proposed schedule.
And I think if I'm recalling right, we agreed that the cost would not exceed $25,000. So we didn't, in order not to have to go out for RFPs on this. And so if we do the additional interviews, we'll have to make up the cost someplace else in that process.
Megan suggested that if we did want additional interviews, that she could deduct the catering piece, and so we would eliminate the catering from the retreat and add interviews if we were looking to stay under that dollar amount.
Okay, and we could just brown bag it, huh?
Yeah. Brown bag.
Okay.
Bring it up here for more review.
Thoughts?
Jim here.
Go, Jim.
Yeah, I think it makes sense, that we could come up with the lunch and coffee maybe in another way outside of this contract. Coffee at a minimum, even if it's going to be brown bag. And then And then my other, I guess my question is, what's the specific feedback around increasing the number of interviews? We have a wealth of focus group information from the HAT and its subcommittees. So I think within the HAT structure, maybe just the HAT leadership would be appropriate there. And then meeting by jurisdiction in groups. I have trouble even getting to 12. So can you talk about that for a minute?
Rick, do you mind sharing your thoughts? That suggestion came from you and your team.
Yeah, I think it was just a minor suggestion. When you look at the up to 25 participants and you have 12 interviews, I think we want to make sure we have all the primary representatives on their RHC interviewed, key staff and administrators, and you might be hemmed in if you're limited to 12 to cover all the bases well enough. And that was just an observation more than anything.
Okay.
And make sure we get enough because we have the HAT group and the frontline worker group. That's important to have that feedback. We want to make sure we got that well-rounded feedback from all the participants and directly into the RHC.
Okay. So when you did the math, Rick, what did you come up with?
That was a long weekend ago.
I know, right?
just rough number of interviews needed.
Well, we kind of just maybe 14, add a couple more just to make sure we cover all the the representatives of the RHC, the administrators and managers and the key technical team folks, just to make sure we had good breadth. And I think City Manager Scott Spitz has his hand up as well.
Okay, Scott.
So just to add on this issue, I think it would be important once all the interviews are conducted, regardless of what number we land on, to make sure that make sure the facilitator appreciates the scope and breadth of what they're going to be talking about. I think that'd be another sort of gut check to make sure that if you need additional interviews.
Yeah, that's a good.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Well, Jim, I thought you made a good point too, that perhaps, the jurisdictions may be able to contribute to the catering and coffee and so forth. So do you all feel like we can get there with the budget by adding back in the 2 more interviews? Yes, no, maybe?
We have Commissioner Mejia has her hand up right now.
I cannot see her.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
Hi. I can hear you, but for some reason I'm not seeing the raise hand function. So
yeah. I'm kind of along the same lines of Jim. Like I'm not sure why the administrators can meet with the elected officials and we can have the interviews kind of bumped in together. When I'm also doing kind of the math, if we're just split between jurisdictions, it's coming below the 12. I see what Rick is saying. If we're kind of just splitting it up between, the administrators having a separate interview and then the elected officials having a separate interview. But I'm not sure why there couldn't be a meeting where it's just the full jurisdiction representative of the RHC instead.
I know I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Keeley.
I know that in the past when we worked with TRPC prior to January 2020, we had a retreat. It was Star Wars movie day, and Mark Daly provided all like a 4-hour retreat for us, and he did individual interviews with folks. And I know that I had an individual interview, and I really appreciated having that candor, being able to be very candid. And Mark Daly's very skilled at interviewing and making you feel comfortable. So I think that there's value. I think as many voices as possible, and when people can have candor is really important, I think also. So I guess I'm not really helping because I don't quite know how to balance it, because it was my suggestion that we, definitely we need to have the HAT in some form of some representation, whether that's just the executive team in a single interview. However, I think also a handful of frontline staff. that are doing this work and executing this, the contracts that are being approved. If, you know, just even to get their perspective on what they even think the RHC or the HAT actually does or is. And I think that having their voice is super important as well. So that's just some thoughts.
When I first read the scope, my first feedback to Megan was that I just feel over first read that 12 interviews might be low. I haven't heard feedback from the RHC yet, but if I were to see anything increase, it would be the number of interviews. So she knew that going into it, that we may feel 12 would be low. And so she, you know, I think thought about that, putting the scope together.
Andy?
Yeah, I'm not sure if the interviews is what is driving up the cost here. I mean, I'm not sure if we're looking at it from that standpoint, but I do think the importance of this retreat cannot be overstated. Right. And the Athena group has just done some really great work with the city of Lacey and our work group. And what the Athena group can bring is the knowledge that Lacey has on our 5 goals that we have come up with when it comes to this issue. Now, coming out of this retreat, what we need to do is marry up those 5 goals from Lacey and then Olympia's plan. And then I know Tumwater's done some work on this as well. And of course, Thurston County and the representatives of the HRC, and see if we can get some commonality so we have something to focus on a regional approach coming out of this that's now going to be driving the work of the RHC going forward. So I think what's important is the end result of the retreat and getting to some commonality, because even from what you've heard from the speakers, the public speaking is this desire of the public, of all of us for that matter, for us to get to take a regional approach, get on the same page, and we're all paddling in the same direction, and to be able to give some proven results back to the community. And that can only happen when we sort of marry the work that we've done in Lacey to Olympia's work, to Tumwater's work, and we have a goal coming out of it, saying, this is what the jurisdictions have done. This is what happens in the retreat. We can talk some of these through. Where can we agree upon? And then we're off. Now we're going to put the resources behind those goals. And so that's at the end. That's what needs to come out of the retreat, because that's what's most important. If it takes 12 interviews, if it takes 50 interviews, it doesn't matter. But getting to that goal is what is the most important thing, in my opinion.
Thank you, Andy. I think Jim had his hand up, and then Brian. And I actually see Brian's hand. This is good.
I think to Andy's point, I've been thinking about that too. We might not be done after this retreat either. Like, we get through this with some facilitation and realize that there's still a couple more questions that we really need to know the answer or the model or whatever that is. So I think having flexibility up to 14 or 15, and then really when the committee builds the agenda with the consultants after those interviews, that's when we'll really know how far we're going to be able to get in those 2 days. And then isn't to belittle Andy's comment about the importance, because I have the same desire for importance, but I do want to just counter a little bit that our policies are already married in the countywide 5-year plan. Nothing changes. Nothing's changed when Olympia did theirs. Lacey's work is all in alignment with that. And so really it's about how do we accomplish and then improve upon that plan. Just for me, just so I'm not speaking for anyone else.
Okay, thanks, Jim. Brian?
Yes, I'm trying to, reading through the services scope and budget, and listening, I'm truly trying to understand the retreat, to be able to figure out how many interviews and some of the other resources. What is the ultimate goal of this retreat? Is it that when the retreat is done, that the Regional Housing Commission has a document that says, here's the responsibilities. This is our mission statement. This is how we're going to do it. This is how it's going to work. Or is this and please forgive me on saying this, is this a feel-good thing where we all just get together and we start going, yes, we have a problem. Yes, we've been doing this. And when we come out of 2 days spending this amount of money and our time, and there is no focus after that. That's what I'm trying to figure out. As I said, I'm new to the council, and I apologize for being, seeming a little lost on this. I've been trying to follow up and see things, but that's my big question: is what is the ultimate goal? And then let's get the financing for that to reach that ultimate goal, so that we come out with, when somebody all of a sudden looks back and says, "Hey, you spent $25,000. What did you do?" And I don't want to see us be like King County in Seattle, where we're dumping hundreds of millions of dollars year after year after year, and there's no results. And then all of a sudden the state's dumping another, millions of dollars, and people are going, what are the results? We're not seeing anything, because at a certain point, and I know this goes a little bit beyond this here, but we need to have something that when we produce and we start spending the money that comes from the taxpayers and everything else, that they're able to look at it and go, okay, you're doing something, instead of just throwing money at a situation that if you add up all the money, you could have just given the people the cash straight up and had them do what they wanted to do. And I apologize if I sounded a little lost on all these, but that's where I'm looking at, is I'm trying to understand this, because I really want to help out. I want to bring a voice, but I just don't know how to focus my voice to help out with that. And I'll mute to here.
Can I give a short answer, Carolyn?
Oh, please.
Okay. So I think your question is a good one, Brian, because you're new, and honestly, having new people ask different questions is how we get better. So the two priorities for this retreat before the county passed the home fund. The first one is to figure out how we fit together with the housing action team, which is a subgroup of Thurston Thrives. And it has a whole bunch of committees that work on specific housing issues. And so how do we fit? How do we have back and forth and communication? Is it formal or informal? Right now, it's really, really too informal. Second to that is, how do we get upstream? So we all City of Lacey, Olympia, Tumwater, and the county are passing affordable housing plans, and all of our current funds, even the new home fund, are really eaten up by the current crisis and don't have funds to get them to the next level up, which I'll call general affordable stock. And so those were the two conversations. And now with the addition of the countywide home fund, the additional piece is, how does that integrate into the RHC? And then what does that final structure look and feel like? That's how I see this conversation based on what we've all been talking about.
Anybody have anything to add to what Jim said before we move on to Keeley, then Romero? Okay, Keeley, take it away.
This is slightly redundant, and I appreciate it being brought up by Councilmember Cooper, but just to remind us that in the ILA, we identified a few years ago that the 5-year plan, the homeless crisis response plan, is the North Star of the directions in which we head to address the issues related to homelessness and affordable housing, but primarily homelessness. And so I just want to remind us that we're in our 3rd year. We'll be rewriting the plan most likely next year. And our homeless crisis response plan work group is going through all of our strategies next week or the week after that to look at what we're doing in 2022 and what we've accomplished since with the 5-year plan passed. So I just really want to recenter us. And I have many soapboxes to stand on that, not just because I wrote it, but I didn't write it. It was a collective effort, but just wanted to remind us of that.
Thank you, Keeley. Just out of curiosity, how many of you have not seen the 5-year plan? And would it be helpful, if you haven't, to get a digital copy or at least a link to where it lives?
I have not seen it. And I am, as I said, I'm going through the website, trying to catch up on everything. I believe there's a link on the website to the 5-year plan, and I have a note to make sure that I read that.
Okay. Anything else quickly that we can do to help get you up to speed, Brian? Well,
no, like one of the things I keep seeing various acronyms, HAT and all these things, and I'm going, okay. And this just comes from, I spent 25 years in the military, and one of the first rules of thumb that I was told when I was retiring was drop all acronyms. Nobody lives on acronyms, and yet almost everything that I see with this group is there's an acronym, and I'm going, what's it stand for? And I'm looking for it and everything. So thank you for letting me know what HAT means. And as I said, I'm doing the best I can to learn because I do have an interest. I care about the situation we're in. And as I said, I want to make sure that we don't go the route that others are currently complaining about, of large amounts of money being dumped somewhere and there's nothing that you can point to and say we made a difference. And that's the reason why I will bring up these questions and ask, and I want to learn, and I want to work with everybody on this. So thank you for your patience.
Sure. Romero, I think you had your hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I appreciate the historical perspective the Commissioner, Councilmember Cooper provided. And that's what I was striking on this retreat. Originally, it was to bring the HAT and the RHC together as to how we can coordinate. And then in the midst of prepping for that retreat, then the county passed the home fund. And that provided yet another opportunity as to how we're going to be, the Regional Housing Council is going to be projecting into the future, considering this funding source, and how we are going to be working through the mechanics really in managing, providing recommendations to the board. So when I reviewed the scope of work a couple of weeks ago, and I look at the interviews, my impression was going to be the interviews will be narrowly focused on those two big elements. So when this group gets to the point of the retreat, we'll have a narrowly focused discussion on those two bigger elements. So based on the conversation that I'm hearing today, the 12 interviews, maybe 14, maybe 20, it appears that we're going to have many different perspectives about what the retreat is all about, and we will not have the time to even touch one of them. So I will encourage the Regional Housing Council to be narrowly focused on the two big elements so we can get some tangible results, as Mayor Ryder stated, because it's only 2 days. And those are two very significant issues. And perhaps the home fund is even the larger one. So that's probably my suggestion. I'm not necessarily keen on 12, 14, but maybe on the questions the consultant is going to be providing in the interviews can be narrowly focused on those two elements as to how the Regional Housing Council can exercise their thought process on the retreat. Thank you.
All right. It's like Danny has her hand up.
Yeah, I just want to appreciate the questions that Brian is asking. There's a lot of complexity to the work that we do here. And I think onboarding is really important. And making sure that as people come onto the Regional Housing Council, that they do get access to the county plan. When we start getting into funding, I'm part of the funding work group. It was just so complicated to wrap my head around, like all the places that money comes in and where it goes out. And I know Tom has a lot of great resources around that, but making sure that new people as they come onto the group get that information so that they can as quickly as possible get up to speed, I think should be a regular practice.
Good point. Would have been nice if those of us who are original members could have been onboarded, but we've had to kind of learn as we go, as they say. Okay. Is this a good place to pause the conversation on the retreat? Is there anything else burning on that you want to talk about?
we have to talk about the money.
Oh, the money. Okay, thank you, Jim. So the price tag is $25,000. My understanding is Olympia is willing to front the money, and we need to figure out how to share the cost and reimburse them. Is that correct?
Yes, and I think the question is whether we are going to use something other than the formula that's in our ILA. And Tom had, I was looking, I don't see it in the minutes, but it was in our packet last month, what that breakdown of that 25 would be based on the formula that we all signed up for in the ILA, which is by population, if I'm not wrong. Is that right, Tom?
Yes, that's correct. Sorry, I was just going back to the last month's packet to try to find that. So the ILA does call for the cost to be shared proportionally based on population. And I was looking.
If you have that document, could you throw it up on the screen, Tom? I think that might be helpful.
Let me.
Does anyone think we should not follow that formula?
I have a question to ask about that formula, because I remember reading it, and this is where I get a little confused about my role. I see that we have Olympia, Tumwater, Lacey, Thurston County, and then it goes myself representing not just Yelm, but Southern Thurston County. And that's where I get lost of how big is my voice? Am I speaking for Yelm only, or am I speaking for Yelm, Rainier, Tenino? And if that's the case, how did we get to that level? Because it's not right for me. The way, we're going to go with this LIA formula. All of a sudden, Yelm's putting in the money, but I'm representing Rainier and Tenino. And how do I approach them and say, hey, we need some help? And that's, maybe that's something that I can learn later, more offline. But I just want to bring up that that's a little confusing to me, because representing Southern Thurston County, that's a large population. And I'm a little lost on how I fit into that LIA formula.
All righty. Maybe Tom
Romero can answer that.
I can share my screen. I found the page
Could we give Brian kind of the quick broad brush on that, and then let him follow up if he has more?
The quick broad brush is the other three cities wouldn't send someone or play. And now we have one of those cities that's created their own home fund and decided to do it on their own with, I don't know what, 25 grand. And so I think it's a really important question, because the way the ILA is written, you're only paying for the Yelm portion, but your voice is bigger.
And I appreciate that. Thank you. That helps out a little bit, because I'm wondering how active I need to be approaching the other Southern County cities to say, hey, I need your help. Or we, as an organization, as you said, if one of them is already starting up their own, how do you lock them out? And is it fair that you lock them out?
They didn't walk in. Carolina, did you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I was just going to answer Mayor Ryder's question about the concerns. I brought up the concerns on that it should be split up evenly. When I looked at the ILA, it did not mention, that retreats would be included in that. So that's why I made the suggestion that it should be split evenly between the jurisdictions.
Okay. Tom, do you have the document, or do you want to throw it up there?
Yes, there you go. So this was, can everyone see that?
Sing out if you need it expanded, please.
Is Thurston County okay with this breakdown? I know, Carolina, you have some questions about it, but.
I'm hearing that Ramiro. Sorry, go ahead, Carolina.
No, I was just going to say that our county manager had the hand up. Sorry, Carolyn.
Right. Yeah. That's
the chart Tom brought up, that's in fact comes out of the ILA, the Regional Housing Council, to cost sharing for larger context. And I think the retreat is a little bit out of this because the retreat itself is giving us the indication as to how we're going to be opening up the ILA again. So I think Commissioner Mejia was suggesting that perhaps it will be an equal contribution by the jurisdictions, because all of us will benefit from the opening the agreement itself. So I agree that Tom took this because that's the umbrella of the cost distribution within the current ILA. But this retreat is a little bit different, in my opinion. And I would probably concur with Commissioner Mejia in this case that perhaps the cost distribution needs to be revisited.
Okay. I'm not able to see screen with this up there, so please just shout out if you have a comment.
Well, I have a question. This is Michael.
Michael?
I guess my question would be if this is a little bit, I mean, we would be paying potentially, I mean, we would probably have to pay for this out of our general fund. I guess I'm curious if the county would be paying for it out of general fund as well, if we do this equally, or is there one of the buckets of funding that we have that could pay for this, like something that's generated by economic activity in each of our jurisdictions where those funds could then all contribute? Because if we're all generating and contributing to that fund, it would sort of seem to kind of serve this regional purpose as opposed to having each of the jurisdictions then pay for it out of general fund.
Ramiro, do you want to answer? And then we'll move on to Jim Cooper.
Answer whether the county will use general fund to pay for this.
Yeah, or if we could use one of the countywide, one of the regional pots where each of our jurisdictions, the economic activity that's happening there then contributes to that pot. Is there any restrictions on some of those pots of money where we couldn't use that to pay for this?
Well, that will be something that Tom may be answering. If we have any capacity in any of the combined regional funds, the Regional Housing Council determines the distribution and allocation. And I don't know if we have capacity within those fund balances. Tom?
Yeah, so I would say this would, for the various activities that we receive, whether that's from the state, the federal government, or even the local document recording fees, I don't believe this would be an eligible program activity under those funds. However, it would be something that would be eligible out of the administrative funds that we receive to kind of administer these programs. You know, those funds are kind of spoken for. If it was the will of this county, could we find the funds, pay for this? You know, I have to say yes, we could find those funds. It definitely puts a pinch on some of our admin funds. So, you know, from my point of view, it wouldn't be my first preference, but it would be eligible as an admin fund, an administrative expense under those funds.
Okay. I think Brian had his hand up next.
I was going to say, I think Jim had his hand up before me.
Oh,
Jim,
I thought
do you want to go first?
Oh, I'm sorry, Jim.
Thanks, Brian. No worries. So 2 quick comments. One, I don't think an even distribution is fair to Tumwater or Yelm when you think about size of entity. And then as you're talking, you know, we all have pretty decent year-over-year sales tax growth. So our sales tax contribution into, you know, the old CIP money, I don't remember what it's called in the new ILA. You know, what if we just take 25K off the top and make this be, it's that important, right? So let's just do that and then move on. Tom? I'm sorry,
So
I'm not
on
so
that,
stalling
so that's, yeah, so HSF, Human Services Fund, is the new CIP. So those funds, just a recollection, you awarded 2-year grants. And so those funds are awarded. Because of the increase, as you said, you did increase sales tax collection. So there was, around 20,000 additional sales tax funding that you did collect this year. In January, you agreed, or you voted to distribute those funds to the other 2 awardees. So in a sense, the 7 or so HSF awards would get a slight bump from that increase. You can kind of go, but that's where that additional tax revenue went. In total, we received probably around 25,000 to administer that fund. So the total admin for HSF is around 25,000.
Okay. Brian, and then Mayor Ryder after that.
Jim kind of touched on what I had a concern with. So I was looking at if you want to do equal, and I didn't even count Tumwater. I was looking at just 5 organizations, and then I'm reading all the people who are participating. The various, as I say, the interviews for not only the RHC members, but also the technical team members and all these others. And I'm thinking, hold it here, if you're going to ask Yelm to pony up $5,000 for one individual, and everybody else is ponying up $5,000 for more than one individual, I'm going to have a hard time approaching my council and saying, I need $5,000 for this retreat. So in reference to payment, I would like to be able to make sure we have a good way of that this is being done, but just please understand, if it's going to cost $5,000 for Councilmember Brian to go on a 2-day retreat, they're going to say, you don't need to go. I'm just going to put that out there just because I know the council that I'm working with. So I appreciate your time. And Jim, thank you for bringing that up first.
Well, which gets back to the original point, which is why we agreed in the original ILA on expenses for the Regional Housing Council would be based on population, which has been what's presented to us. And so I respectfully disagree that we now come to a point and say, well, a retreat, something different. We should look at a different funding strategy. We're still working under the ILA, which breaks it down per population, which is what we all agreed on is fair. We shouldn't be changing that formula. Now, after the fact, once you open up the ILA, we want to discuss a different funding mechanism, that's up for discussion. But until then, we're operating under the old ILA, and we should fund based on what we all agreed upon. And so that would be my recommendation. Let's move forward with the funding as it's been broken down. That's what's fair, in my opinion. And let's get on with this retreat.
Alrighty, Michael, and then Carolina.
Yeah, I agree entirely with Mayor Ryder and his comments as well. Like we just had a retreat for the city council, and I think the total came to about $7,000 for the entire council for a 2-day retreat. And even the discussion of that amount was a pretty lengthy discussion on our part, because funds are, $7,000 is nothing to sneeze at when we are approving contracts to help local nonprofits deal with this issue for $10,000 or $15,000 here and there, and every little bit helps. Certainly when we did the ILA and we included that breakdown, my intent with that, and I think that the understanding of our council is that that's how these things are going to be paid for moving forward. So I agree with Mayor Ryder. Maybe it's something we can talk about at the retreat, but right now that's the agreement that we operate under, and the one that when I report back to my council, that's the terms in which we signed that and agreed to. So if we depart from that, I think it'll be we'll probably have to have a conversation with our council to sort of try to iron that over and smooth it out.
Okay, Carolina?
Again, I just disagree with this. I feel like the ILA is unclear on what kind of activities, and retreat is definitely not included in there. And especially in a retreat where, I mean, 2 council members for each jurisdiction besides Yelm will be appearing there. There will be only 1 county commissioner. So the level of benefit to it's quite different. So, you know, right now I'm in complete disagreement of this and how this funding mechanism is moving forward.
Well, how do we rock this off center? I can appreciate what you're saying, Carolina, but I can also appreciate, you know, that we're looking at not the players at this table, but the populations that each of our constituencies represent, and roughly that it also reflects our financial capacity, so to speak. As it turns out, Lacey now is a little bit bigger than Olympia, but Olympia's budget is certainly bigger than Lacey's. But I think for the most part, the math does kind of follow that logic pattern. So
I just suggest you having a vote on it. Let's move on.
We could do that, Carolina.
I will have to bring this to the commission and see if they're in agreement of this, because I also have to let them know of this, and we can, you know, we'll probably have to vote on this as well. Thank you.
Well, I think the expenditures would have to be approved by each jurisdiction anyway, so that should work. Romero, is there anything else you'd like to say on that score?
No, and I think it's some of the conversation is good, but even I can take you back maybe a few meetings back when I came to the table and asked for additional administrative help to support the Regional Housing Council, because it appears to continue to be on the back of the county, and there's a lot of stuff that puts time and effort on supporting the Regional Housing Council, and Megan Porter provides the communications plan, and she's carrying the water for the most part for the Regional Housing Council. The administrative aspects of the Regional Housing Council are continued to be on the backs of the county. When I came and asked for additional help from an administrative point of view, I didn't get any support from the Regional Housing Council. And perhaps that's why you see the sense of the reaction from Commissioner Mejia, perhaps mine as well. It continued to be a lopsided approach as to how the county continues to bear the front of the effort.
Okay, thank you for sharing that. I'm looking at the agenda, I'm looking at the clock, and we have a couple more points to go. So we probably ought to wrap up this discussion pretty quickly. I guess would anybody, well, I'm sorry, Michael and then Carolina again for comments. Did you still have your hands up? No, okay. Would anybody like to offer a motion?
Well,
I'd like to offer a motion.
My motion would be to take this back to each of our councils for discussion, and then we can come back to it. But I still stand by the interlocal agreement that we are all operating under. You know, and it just seems weird to change the interlocal agreement at this stage of the game. So I appreciate where the county's position. From the jurisdiction's position, the county is also holding the purse strings for a majority of these dollars as well. And that's just the way it's set up. I think once we get out of this retreat, we'll have a new funding mechanism with the regional, with the home fund. Now it'll be a countywide, mostly countywide home fund that's going to bring support. And so we're not going to be in this bind of how the Regional Housing Council is funded, because there's a built-in funding mechanism that will hopefully support it. But you know, we need to get through this retreat. I think if at this point we're talking what, $11,000 in the county, whatever. I mean, hopefully the county can find those dollars. It's that important. But right now, the interlocal agreement is what we all agreed upon, and that's how we need to go forward. I just don't know how we go back and try to change the interlocal agreement at this stage.
Okay, thank you for your comments. as alternate, though he cannot offer a motion. Keeley?
Chair Cox, thank you. I just wanted to just bring timeline into it, and this feeds into our next topic on the agenda in terms of how often the Regional Housing Council meets. Right. However, you know, Megan and her team have a specific window, and I just want to make sure that we are keeping that in mind, because I know that we can kick this can a little bit down the road, and there is definitely a timeline associated with this. She is not available in June. Moving onward. So just want to pull that out.
Good to know. Okay. So we're back to, does somebody want to offer a motion on Jim?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm going to offer a motion. I want to, sorry, I was looking for the language in the ILA because I remember it being really clear, but I want to, so I'm going to make a motion in a second, but I want to have it be contingent on the county manager and city managers and administrators telling Tom Webster that they are in for their portion of the funds. Because I don't think we can allocate funds for Tumwater sitting here. And so if my wording isn't exact, then I want you to make sure you understand my intent. Because I'm struggling with that exact wording. And then I also want to just respectfully push back a little bit on Romero, because that funding ask was for project positions for 2 really specific projects. And we all said, we think we should take that money out of the project funds like we would any other public works project. So I wasn't asked for administrative money, and that's a different conversation, I think. So I think the Home Fund will help us alleviate that. I have high hopes for that, as it's done for the city of Olympia. So with that, I move to accept the scope of work as discussed and the funding allocations as presented, conditionally on the city managers, city administrator, city manager, city administrator, and county administrator letting Tom Webster know that they're in for their portion of the allocation.
I'll second it.
You can't, Andy.
I'll second it.
All righty. So it's been moved by Jim, seconded by Michael, that we go forward with this contingent on the cities and their managers letting Tom know that we're in for our prorated amount. Did I get that right? Okay.
And then I'll just ask, for Keeley, after we take this action, if it's successful, to tell us what that date needs to be so we can get going with Megan.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion?
I have just one discussion, and it's a recommendation for future. I like this motion. We move forward with it. But to address what was brought up by the county, what I'd like to recommend is that we relook at the funding and maybe look at not by population or anything, but by the individuals that are being provided, if that makes sense. As I said, I'd like to move forward with this, and I'm already reaching out to my city in reference to the 900, but if there needs to be more, if it can be justified, it's justifiable as I say, if we're looking at how many participants, dividing it up by, and then whoever they represent comes up with their funding. But that's not part of this motion, but I would like to move forward with that suggestion.
Just one comment on what you're saying there, Brian. I see no reason why your city manager and your planning manager could not be part of this. There's nothing that says.
I'm hoping that they can be. As I say, it's right now, this is something that I don't think is on their horizon. And so I'm bringing it to the council with the next meeting of what's going on with the retreat. And hopefully we can get some people to also attend with me.
Sure.
But as I said, it's dependent on, as I said, when we're looking at this, I like what Jim, I support what he has motioned, but I would like to have for future discussion with this is if we're looking at how to try to help make it equal, that if Yelm's bringing 3 people and the county's bringing 10 people, to say $5,000 for 3 people and $5,000 for 10 people, that's not equal. We go, okay, let's look at how many people are being brought, and that is how that funding comes down to, if that makes sense, which is what I wanted to propose. But as I said, I like what Jim proposed as well.
Right. Okay. Well, if we could, let's park that idea and move forward with the vote because the clock is ticking. Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right.
I'm opposed. Thank you.
Carolina is opposed. All right. So the motion carries 3-1. Sorry, Carolina. And if we could, let's move on to the next item with talking about increasing the frequency of our meetings. Keeley or Tom, do you want to lead that?
Can I just, sorry, can I just go back? I want to clarify. I believe the vote was 4-1, just for the record. Is that correct? Not 3-1?
It was 4-1. You're right.
And then also before we go on, Keeley, when does Tom need to know that by?
I will ask, Megan is out of the country as of today. And so I want to get a definitive date. She, in our conversation, mentioned that she is booked starting in June. I don't have that exact date. And so Tom, I will talk with Tom and Darian about it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as soon as possible for right now, and then you'll get back to us. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if we're going to be if we're going to come forward with a decision in the next RHC meeting, which is in a month, that significantly impacts the timeline.
Well, I think unless somebody pulls out, we have a scope of work to get the contract done and then start working on the agenda and the interviews.
Okay, great.
I think we're there. Alrighty, frequency of meetings. Keeley, Tom?
So you and me, Tom?
Well, I mean,
I think.
Yeah, this was, I guess I'll just start it off, but I know this was kind of discussion a little bit last month of interest in kind of talking about whether once a month is sufficient for the Regional Housing Council. Last month we talked about going to a kind of 2 hours, so we extended this meeting from an hour and a half to 2 hours. Right. But at the executive committee meeting, we did talk about wanting to raise the idea of meeting twice a month. Topics come up, decisions get made, and it kind of, I think this retreat is a good example of having to wait another month potentially for kind of the next round of decisions. So whether it would be appropriate to meet twice a month, with perhaps one of those meetings being a shorter time period, maybe an hour, just so decisions can be made, so there's not such a long gap between meetings, so things can move forward more quickly. I think one of the recommendations would be, in lieu of that, would be disbanding, if that's the right word, the funding work group, and so that the RHC would also take on that role of the funding work group, that the role that they've been playing. So those discussions would happen kind of at the RHC level. So elevating the funding work group up to the entire RHC. So that's what was discussed at the RHC Executive Committee. I asked Commissioner Mejia or Chair Cox to elaborate on kind of those proposals that we wanted to bring forward to this whole group.
Okay. I think Tom and Keeley both hit the concern about, because there is a month between meetings, things are moving more slowly than they should be moving or could be moving. And I think we're all painfully aware that we haven't come as far as we'd like to as a council. So I think there's merit in that. I also hear concerns from members that our schedules are already crammed with meetings, and that squeezing another one in is going to be difficult. And I get that. One proposal I would make is that instead of 2 what we call formal full meetings of the council, that the first meeting of the month be sort of akin to a work session where we could still take a vote, but we wouldn't have all the formal committee reports. We would have a very narrow, short agenda on items that needed timely action. So no more than an hour, hopefully less than an hour. And if there weren't timely items, we could perhaps, cancel the first meeting of the month as well, to try to take some of the pressure off already too busy people. So Carolina, do you have anything to add based, from the conversation we had?
No, I mean, I think the points have been hit on. Last year, one of the main complaints was that we were not communicating between jurisdictions, and the information was not getting in soon enough to the rest of the jurisdictions as, everyone was working. And I think having a meeting twice a month is honestly more effective. These issues are, they're so fast paced that it's inefficient to not meet more than once a month, and other boards meet twice a month just because of the information that needs to get through and the votes and policy decisions that need to be made. And I feel like just being this important of a regional issue, we should be meeting more than once a month. And I'm okay with having a work session, kind of the hybrid that Carolyn has suggested, but I do feel for efficiency that we should be meeting more than twice a month.
I think it's important that we hear from staff as well, because they're very definitely affected by this. So maybe we can hear from our city and county managers first and then see where we land. Hear your thoughts.
I guess I could jump in. I guess my only comment would be if it's very limited to sort of business items that need to be dealt with right away, and so it's a very truncated meeting, I guess that would work. But if it's another long formal meeting, I'm a little bit worried about just constraints of time and people's schedules.
I see John Doe nodding his head, presumably in agreement.
Yeah, absolutely. And then maybe we experiment. I mean, maybe the experiment is a sort of short meeting that's around moving items forward and see what that looks like. And if that's not fitting the bill and what we need is more opportunity for sort of a work session type format, then maybe we explore that. I have no doubt we could fill the time available. And so I'm sort of like Scott. It's like, let's stay focused on the task and make sure that it's productive. Because just this call is 25 resources that could be doing other things.
Sure. Chief, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, just from the City of Olympia's perspective, I do think we have the resources to be at this meeting, and certainly would appreciate it if it were shorter, a work type session or a business meeting that Councilmember Cox suggested would be much preferred than a longer meeting, obviously. But I think it's important that we have the efficiency in this process in order to move things forward more quickly. Again, going back to this earlier discussion, that can't wait until the end of March to continue this discussion. So we need to be able to move things forward quicker than that. So.
All righty. Ramiro, do you want to add anything to it?
Yeah. Obviously, another meeting always put some constraints on the schedules that we have, but I like the idea of what John suggested to be, and you, Councilmember Cox, to be actionable items. Mm-hmm. And if we don't have any actionable items on a shorter meeting, an hour, we just cancel it. I don't think we need to just meet because this is the hub, this is the main meeting. I think obviously is a value added to have those meetings, but on the intermediate meeting, if there is actionable items as a result of this meeting, then we have a place and time in which we can discuss those items. If we don't have one, we just cancel it. Perhaps an hour meeting.
All righty. Who Jim, you were looking thoughtful there. Did you have anything you wanted to say?
I mean, I think it's good that Danny came on, because my thoughtfulness is just that, you know, looking at the second and third weeks of the month for my own schedule, it's, you know, if it's before 5 o'clock, I could probably make it work, but I know that's challenging for other people. And so just to know that the likelihood of having alternates coming in for action in that model is higher. And so it's going to be more important that we, you know, communicate amongst each other in our, you know, sort of call it our home teams, if you will. But you know, if people think we need it, then and staff are okay with it, then we certainly have a lot of conversations to have. So.
Okay. Anybody else?
Keeley's hand is up.
Can you say that again?
Keeley's hand has been up.
Keeley, sorry, not seeing your hand.
That's okay. Thank you. So I just want to, you know, Tom, myself, Jacinda, Keith, Darian, Ariel from our team, Brad, Rick, we all meet weekly for an hour every single week. We also have the executive committee where we meet. So that's Tom and myself, and then administrative staff from the county that meet with the chair and vice chair of the Regional Housing Council. So just want to shout out that ostensibly there could be 2 executive meetings prior to each meeting to set agendas, and that's okay. But just, you know, we are working quite a bit just on Regional Housing Council, and it is incredibly valuable. And in no way do I think that it's a meeting that I actually look forward to. So I just want to, just in terms of our, like how much time we are putting into it, a lot of this falls on Tom and myself. And then also we did have a conversation at the executive team that to consider in terms of staff that and this could be a topic for the retreat, not necessarily to be decided on tonight, but if we have a chair and a vice chair, one is always going to be the county as per the ILA, and one ostensibly from another jurisdiction. Should that jurisdiction identify a staff that would be basically the me of the technical team? So Tom would remain basically the manager of the technical, you know, the staff side of things. And then now it would be Rick Walker, somebody who works with Rick, that would just kind of take on that a little bit extra administrative staff. So there'd be like a little bit of distribution of staffing and that way. So that's one idea that we came up with moving forward, and something we can consider, but just wanted to give a picture of what the staff are up to.
Well, I think Rick is keeping his poker face here. I don't know if maybe we could park that and come back to it once people have had a time to let it penetrate and think about, maybe have the technical team take that up.
Yeah,
okay.
I think there's a like before and after, you know, the retreat model, right? I mean, at some point after the retreat, there's going to be hopefully some agreement on how the RHC is going to go forward, how it's going to be funded going forward, so on and so forth. Looking at the countywide home fund, what does that mean? And, you know, we've obviously talked about having the RHC have independent staff as well, and how that's funded. So that's all going to be discussed and come out of the retreat, and with hopefully some agreement. And so, you know, we're having this conversation right now, which is fine, but what we're trying to do is just get through the retreat, and so we can get some agreement on how this is all going forward. So, you know, like I said, it's before retreat and after retreat is, I think, quite a bit of difference.
Carolyn, you have Danny followed by Michael, if I can help you.
Thank you. I'm really not seeing hands raised with this screen for some reason, or most hands. So Danny, then Michael. Thank you.
Yeah, I just, I've heard 2 different proposals around this additional meeting, and one of those was disbanding the regional, the funding work group and have this replace that. And the other is to have a short business meeting in addition to the monthly meeting. And those are 2 very different things from my perspective. Like the funding work group sometimes those are 2-hour meetings and we're going through proposals, and it's so I think we'll need to get clear on that. Adding an additional meeting with the funding work group, then some of us are obligated to 3 meetings a month then. As Jim said, alternates, and we can tap in and tap out and make sure there's at least somebody there to vote. But I just want to acknowledge that I've heard 2 different proposals that are not in alignment with one another in terms of what this meeting could look like.
All right, well, Tom, unless I misunderstood, these are 2 separate things and one is not dependent on the other. Is it all right with you if we park the idea about the disbanding the RFP and just focus right now on meeting frequency between meetings?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, because I think that's needs to have a bigger conversation than what we can do right now. But thank you, Danny. And then was it Michael next?
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't really have too much to add because I agree with what sort of seems to be the emerging consensus around adding a second meeting and keeping it sort of narrowly tailored or focused on the immediate business that needs timely action. So I don't really have much else to add other than that. Makes a lot of sense to me as the next step.
Okay. All righty. So I guess we need to formalize this, memorialize it in a motion. Maybe you want to take a shot at that?
I want to see the doodle poll first. Romero put his hand up, Carolyn.
Oh, Romero.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mayor Ryder brought an excellent point. Is what is the context before the retreat and after the retreat. Maybe a good idea for the Regional Housing Council to determine the frequency of the meetings and the intent of those meetings could be an item to be discussed at the retreat moving forward. I think Mayor Ryder brought an excellent point of the retreat itself is going to give us the future of the Regional Housing Council as to how we're going to be moving along.
I appreciate your point on that, Romero. I also appreciate Andy's point. I'm like mentally toting up all the things we've talked about asking of this retreat. And I'm a little concerned that we're asking too much of it. Jim, do you have any thoughts that you'd like to add on that? Because you've been our retreat maestro here.
I think the bigger piece about funding group, to Danny's point, is very separate, and that to me is a retreat conversation that's kind of hooked with what does the community advisory infrastructure, for lack of a better description, look like? Because at Home Fund in Olympia, our advisory committee does a lot of what the funding work group is doing right now for us. And so I think there's some conversations to be had, but I for right now, I would say, let's figure out what date works and add that 1-hour meeting between now and June so that we have it and we can cancel it if we need to. And then we can talk about the bigger picture of the structure once we know what it looks like.
That almost sounded like a motion. Can we call it that?
I don't see, I hear consensus, so I don't know what you need a motion for.
Oh.
But well, yes, if you want to, somebody can make a second.
Yeah. Well, I'll second it.
Okay.
Point of personal privilege here. So I think we've kind of talked this to death. So all in favor of adding a second 1-hour max business meeting a month from now till June, and then we can reevaluate and see where we are. Please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right. Do you think we can schedule the next one before our next meeting, which is coming up on March 23rd? Because
we will try.
Sounding like we may have some retreat decisions to make that we may not want to wait until late March to make?
We will send out a doodle poll and try to find a time that works for folks.
Okay, that sounds good. All righty. So that brings us to good of the order and just the note that the next meeting is on the 23rd. So I note that the time is growing late, but does anybody have, it is 6 o'clock on the nose. Does anybody have a burning issue that they really need to bring to the table?
Carol and I do, and I'll be really quick, but because it was brought up in public comment, I think it's just really important that as our community talks to us about mitigation, that we remind them, and frankly, to Assistant City Manager Keith Staley's comments in the newspaper, the mitigation site is exactly what we knew we were going to get out of that. There are no surprises. It is an unfortunate Band-Aid in a significant crisis. If you want to look at the tiny home village that's being operated like permanent supportive housing, or the formal shelter infrastructure, those are getting different outcomes because they've had the investment put into them that are necessary. And so, of course, we could have put more in, maybe, but I honestly right now know where we would have found it from because we haven't had any other partners that are willing to play in that space. And so I just want to make sure that there's no surprises, at least from my perspective as a policymaker. It's really awful, and I would love it if it was better, but it's still 100% better than it was before it was open. So thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Anybody else? All righty.
That's a very fair point, Jim. That's a very fair point.
It is. And Olympia has certainly invested a lot of time and effort, and it's not easy being the epicenter. We appreciate all of you. Alrighty, well, if there's nothing else, I'll call for a motion to adjourn.
Right. I'll move that one.
All right, happily so. Huh? Okay, I think we've got it. Well, thank you, everybody, and thank you for putting up with my screen that doesn't always show a raised hand. And thank you to Rick Walk for prompting me, telling me somebody has their hand raised. So anyway, thank you, and hopefully we'll see you sooner than next month. Take care. Bye.